and the rights of us to protect us, and the constitutional rights for the Victims' Right Amendment. Victims' impact statement and victims' rights are not only for the victims, however, it is for the family members as well as society. Judges and juries need to hear the impact of the crime of the victim as well as the family, and also for the society to hear. Victims' impact statement become part of the court records and can be used for civil and personal injury cases. Our family was never ordered any restitution. We had to pay unexpected funeral expenses because when they went in, and once again her body was burned beyond recognition, and we had to make an immediate decision. At that point, we had to move very quickly, and when our state going to hold convicted crimes accountable in regards to financial losses to victims and families? When is our state going to hold responsibility? We were navigating our way through a judicial system with little to no guidance or support in the input of dealing with traumatic loss of our loved one. There is so much more which can be said on the importance of victims' rights. I hope this brief reflection of what our family went through, the pain that we went through, their winter of loss will be catalysts for constitutional victims' right amendments. And policy this spring is an upcoming General Assembly. Thank you.
I'd like to take a moment right now to recognize all of the victims advocates that we have in the room. I've seen so many of you come in. We have victims advocates here today that advocate for domestic violence, for suicide victims, for parents of murdered children, for sexual abuse, for child abuse, for trafficking. These people work night and day behind the scenes all the time and do not have any rest because the victims out there are so numerous. So what I'd like to do today is for all of those of you that are one of these victims advocates, if you would please raise your hand and wave at us. Some of you are already standing, and then stand. If you're seated, please stand. So, yes. Yes, thank you. Beth Goodrich is here from the Coalition for Domestic Violence, and this is Domestic Violence Month. So in honor of that, we're going to have the Capitol Dome lit in purple for a week. So, okay. So thank you for all of all that you all are doing for domestic violence and all of the victims groups. Thank you to the advocates.
Thank you. I will. Yes, and if you'll please note the red figures that are around the rotunda, that reflects victims, individual victims that have been killed in domestic violence or intimate partner relationship. So it's important that we recognize that this is an issue that continues to be uppermost in the fatalities in the state. Our next presenter is a gentleman by the name of Keith Wilbert Sr. Mr. Wilbert and his family lost their son in a murder incident while he was a student at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. Keith and members of the family have now committed to advocating for legislation to change and enhance victim rights across the state. So please help welcome Mr. Keith Wilbert.
Good morning. My name is Keith Edwin Wilbert Sr. I stand before you today to advocate for a victim's right Amendment, as I received a personal and up-close education about the lack thereof of victim rights. On September the 23rd of 2015, my son, Keith Edwin Wilbur Jr., was murdered in his home during a purported home robbery, where 4 others were present but unharmed. He was a student at the University of Arkansas Pine Bluff. I'm outraged and deeply saddened that my son's life was taken. All of his potential, we will never know. But what I am even more outraged by is the fact that over a year and no one is being held accountable for this atrocity and for the way my family and I have been treated during this process. Sadly, throughout this whole ordeal, no one ever stopped to mention such a thing as victim rights. My family was unaware of the counseling we so desperately needed. Sadly, we didn't know that there was such a thing as victim rights advocate. Sadly, we had no idea that victims too and their families have rights. Today, I encourage you to stop allowing the people who we elect and are appointed or hired to protect and serve to treat victims and their families as second-class citizens. Did you know, because I didn't know, crime victims have no enumerated rights in 18 state constitutions, nor the U.S. Constitution. But criminals and those accused of crimes, they have rights in every state and the U.S. Constitution. California passed a law called Marsy's Law. Marsy's Law provides equal rights for crime victims, such as victims and their families, receiving information about the rights and services available to them. Victims and their families have the right to receive notifications of proceedings and major developments in the criminal case, the right to due process, and to be treated with fairness and respect for the victim's dignity, the right to be free from intimidation, harassment, and abuse from anyone, including those directly involved with the case or proceedings of the accused, the right to be heard. I tell you, my family and I will not be bullied into being silent. We're going to continue to fight for justice for my son, Keith Edwin Wilbur Jr. We will do that with every fiber in our bodies. I ask that each of you begin to petition our state legislators to make victims' rights an issue of the utmost importance. I pray that if anything good can come out of something so horrific, I pray, 1, that my son's murder be brought to justice, and 2, that no other family will have to deal with what my family has endured. Because in the future, there will be laws in place to protect all victims and their loved ones. I'm a father who is deeply hurt by my son's murder, who is still seeking answers. I have had mostly sleepless nights since September 23rd of 2015, because I'm not going to rest until I have justice for my son, Keith Edwin Wilbur Jr. It's time for accountability. It's time for change. It's time for Victims' Right Amendment. It's time for justice for my son, Keith Edwin Wilbur, and all other unsolved cases in the state of Arkansas. It's time for change. Thank you.
Thank you. Another important part of this equation is the legislature and what laws we pass. And in the 2015 legislative session, we had probably 20 to 25 laws that were passed that addressed issues for victims in different ways. So right now, I'd like for the legislators that are here today on a Friday at noon, when they could be home in their districts, honoring you guys as victims. And I'd like to honor them for legislative action that they have taken on your behalf. Many of them could not be here today, but if you could recognize Bob Ballinger, Senator, back there. Yes. He passed lethality assessment and victimless prosecution and several other things. Then I see Senator Joyce Williams, Joyce Elliott. Oh my goodness, Williams is behind me. Yes, yes. An unholy. And she is always at the forefront of working for the underserved, and we appreciate. And Joyce, please stand for us if you would. That's Senator Joyce Elliott. Senator Williams behind me is always standing up for the victims and their victims' rights, and he's been at the podium, but we want to recognize him as well. Thank you to him. I see Charles Armstrong back there. He's always standing up for who we got. And I've got somebody else I've missed. Oh, here we go. Carolyn Brown has always been a victim's advocate. Representative Brown. Okay, who else? We've got Representative Flowers. There she is. She snuck in on me. Thank you, Vivian. Okay. Is there another that I have missed? I encourage you to get to know your legislators and to go to them with the issues that you think that you need resolved, and they are the place to start. And they always have an open ear. I have found that to be so. So thank you.
Brittany Humphrey is going to be our next presenter, and I want to tell you that she has a passion for serving and for being an advocate for others, and has created a personal platform through her involvement in a number of pageants across the state, which I had no idea about, but you will probably be more familiar than I was on that. And her platform is Break the Silence Preventing Child Sexual Abuse. Brittany lived through abuse for a number of years by a trusted teacher, and she has a wonderful story, and a story that exemplifies why we need to be attentive to victim rights, particularly in regard to children. They have nobody to speak for them. They have no way of accessing the kinds of things unless there are caring, knowledgeable adults who can be there in their stead. Brittany works with college students as well as children in grades K through 6, and is involved in collegiate and youth ministries. Please welcome Brittany to the podium.
"10 days ago, I sat in a room with 3 other people, and between the 4 of us, we shared our heartbreaking stories. One was sexually abused at 6 years old. One is in a relationship with someone who was sexually abused as a child. I was sexually abused at 8 years old, and the 4th person has a nephew who was sexually abused last year at age 6. We all had either faced the trauma personally or have a personal relationship with someone who has. We would have never known that if we had not broken our silence in the room that night. 8 days ago, I received a text message from a teenager who was sexually abused this year and is frightened at the thought of testifying against the abuser in court if the abuser does not take a plea. I wouldn't have any way to help her if she wouldn't have broken her silence. Those two situations can be added to the countless conversations, text messages, emails, calls, and social media messages that I have received since becoming an advocate. I created my personal platform, Break the Silence, Preventing Child Sexual Abuse, 4 years ago, and am so grateful that God has given me the strength to break the silence for those who cannot speak up for themselves. My prayer is that through telling my story, I can show what Christ is doing through me and hopefully prevent others from having to go through the trauma that I went through. It all begins with breaking the silence. The most vivid memory that I have during the 8 months that my 3rd grade teacher was sexually abusing me is the moment he hurt me the most. Because I was in so much pain, I asked him why he was doing this to me. He told me it was because he loved me. And as a child, that was what skewed my definition of love. I am pursuing a master's degree in counseling, and many of my classes require each student to tell about their earliest childhood memory. Sometimes I'm okay with telling mine, but sometimes I want to force my brain to remember something else, as the trauma caused me to block out so much of my childhood. It's almost as if I hate thinking about my childhood because I can't help but to remember what that man did to me. Although those memories of the abuse haunt me the most, the actions I had to take after the abuse still linger in my mind. I remember being interviewed at the police station. I remember going to Arkansas Children's Hospital for a medical exam. And still today, I can see myself as a kid sitting in the courtroom testifying with so many people looking at me and my abuser sitting directly to the right of me. As a victim, I speak for myself and hopefully many others in saying that the trauma that we have faced is something that is hard enough to face. And then to be required to relive it in a police station, at a hospital, in a courtroom is terrifying and leaves memories that we want so hard to forget. The trauma has lasted for years due to victims having to testify in front of the criminal. I do not think a child should have to testify in the same room as the abuser. Victims are more than a witness or a piece of evidence in a trial. Victims deserve their rights because they are the ones to whom a debt is owed. I was blessed with a support system who did what was necessary for me to get the help that I needed after speaking up and telling what that man had did to me. However, not all victims have that support. With the information